Hello, this is Chris Bignell, your ICD-10 Diagnosis Coding Instructor. This is the first part of an introduction recording to the course. In your introduction recordings there is going to be some very important information, so be sure to be ready to take some notes and listen to all of the recordings. Welcome to this course. I love to teach this course. It's a very difficult course, so plan on working hard, working often, practicing. It is a course that is going to be a step up from your first semester courses as far as critical thinking goes and just the work involved in it. Please know that this is probably going to be one of your first technical skill courses, and I put quotes around technical skills because this isn't theory, this isn't something like that. It's more like if you think of a welder actually going to weld. This is something where you're actually going to begin to learn a technical skill. Now, I tell all the students in the program that at the end of all of your program coding courses, not just at the end of this course, but all of your coding courses at the end of the program, you will have the skills of an entry-level coder. Okay, not until that time will you be an entry-level coder. So what you learn in this course, you will apply in future courses in the program. Your Practicum 1, your Applied Coding, your Reimbursement course, and so on. So in this course, just as within any other course here at the Technical College, one of the first things you're going to be asked to do is to complete an introduction discussion post and also respond to at least one classmate. This is the college's mechanism for tracking students that show up and who do not show up. Your initial post will be worth 5 points for this course. Your response will be worth another 5 points. They are due by the end of the first week, and that is Sunday, January 28th in this case, or in any other semester at the end of the first week. I am required to report those who have posted as showing up or not showing up. If you are a no-show, the college does drop you from the course, so keep that in mind. Back to the course now. In this particular course you will be pulling on the information that you learned in anatomy and physiology, in medical terminology, and human disease. Now, I don't think that you're going to remember everything from all of those courses right off the top of your head, but you have the material from those courses and you have a way to go back and find information and research on it. With that in mind, you will have several situations in this course when you need to do that, or you will have a question. And I welcome questions, whether it be online, a phone call, in the My Choice course sessions. But please know one of the first things that I'm going to ask you is, did you research this question yourself? And I want you to try to figure out the answers yourself. Research shows that typically people will remember things if they find out the answer themselves versus me just giving you the answer, and then in 2 weeks when you come across a situation again, you come back to me for the answer again because again you were given it. For example, Chris, I don't know what the acronym TMJ stands for, and if I just tell you that, in a few weeks you're going to come back to me and ask the same question. That won't happen if you try to research yourself. But please know I am available and do want to help you and answer questions. Now, you should familiarize yourself with this course in the E360 Learning Management System. You're going to want to pay attention to the schedule because the schedule will indicate what body systems, what we're studying, and what your assignments are for points. There's a lot of practice in this course, so if it's not listed on the schedule for points, that means it's practice. The first learning plan actually is one of the larger ones. It expands 4 weeks, and during these first 4 weeks you are going to be learning the basics of coding and what conventions and guidelines are. Will you memorize all of those? No, but you will become familiar with them. You will know where to go back and look at the how-tos of coding, following the guidelines and conventions and steps. I have this learning plan pretty well laid out as far as what is due each of the 4 weeks, week 1, 2, week 3, and 4, as far as practice, PowerPoints, recordings, assignments. At the end of the 4 weeks, you will have a final exam on that learning plan. About every 4 weeks, I'm going to be testing you. Those tests are yet to be written, so they don't necessarily show up on the schedule, but I will alert you to those well in advance. Along with each learning plan, I will have a couple short recordings to guide you through your book and the material and highlight what is important. So for each learning plan, it is important to listen to those recordings, have your PowerPoint available and your books available as you're listening to the recordings, taking notes. Next, I want to talk to you about your code book. Familiarize yourself with the code book, and that will finish this first recording. And then in the second recording, I'll talk a little bit about your other book, the AHA Handbook. So first now, with the code book, this is the code book that says 2018 ICD 10-CM Expert for Hospitals, the complete official code set. So this is your code book. The other book is going to be what you might think of as your textbook. So with this code book, you look at the right hand side where all the pages are. There's a lot of different colors. The first part, for the most part, is a shade of gray, and so we'll take a look at that first. If you open up your cover and flip a few pages, you're going to see your table of contents, and which indicates the preface, what's new, an introduction of coding and how to use this book, what the organization is, the overview of the conventions, some additional annotations. Over to the next column in the table of contents, you have the official guidelines, and that is at that point going to be the introduction to the book, and then we get to the index of diseases and injuries, and so we'll talk about that in a moment. But again, this is a code book for diseases, injuries, or conditions. It is not for procedures, nor is this class for procedures. So if we flip from the table of contents, the next page talks about what is new for 2018. And it lists several new codes and updates. And the coding system is updated annually, every year, and the updates are usually effective October 1st of the year through the September 30th of the following year. And one of the things along with the updates that I want to mention is that because there's so many updates, and your book here does not list all of them, there's approximately 600 updates for this year, and actually if you look at Roman numeral number 4, it gives you new codes, revised codes, and code changes that are make the code invalid. So With that, I want you to know as an instructor, I each year update this course, every body system, every competency for the new semester. Keeping that in mind, I do not have all of the lessons open for the course right away because I am working on updating them. I will have lesson plans opened well in advance. If you are working ahead, please know I might not be as far ahead as you are, but I do try to keep track of where students are at, and if there's a student working ahead, I do try my very best as time allows to at least be a week or two ahead of that student. But if somebody starts working really far in advance, I might fall behind, but I will maintain the schedule, and that is what I am committed to. Next in the code book, if you go to Roman numeral number 8, you have the history, the introduction, and that is a good read, good for background information. And then moving on to the next page, how to use this book. It says official sources, steps to correct coding, the organization of it, and each of those sections, even moving on to the next page, we will be stepping through as we're moving through the first learning plan, the first 4 weeks, and then when we get to coding neoplasms or drugs and chemicals or external causes, we will address those as they come up in the schedule and according to our textbook. Also take a look at, breeze through the overview of official conventions, and again all of this is going to be covered in your first learning plan in the handbook / textbook. Okay, so these are the basics to coding, what you need to know to move on to the body systems. And then next at the beginning of the codebook here you have the section titled Additional Annotations, and it gives you an idea of what some of the symbols mean, and as you begin coding and move throughout the semester, those will just become routine, kind of common knowledge to you. What deleted texts are, the additional character symbols, some of the key words in your code descriptions are going to be printed in green. They're printed in green to sort of highlight to you, do you want to select this code because this means right, or do you want to select this code because this means left? And then there are some specific Medicare code edits. And as we're learning coding in this course, we really don't pay a whole lot of attention to the Medicare code edits because we aren't coding according to payer yet. We are simply learning how to code, and there is enough to learn how to code all the body systems in this course that we don't need to concentrate on Medicare right now. That's something that will come up in your reimbursement class. And then moving on through the additional annotation sections, it just gives you a highlight to some things to be on the lookout for. Again, you're not going to remember all of these, so keep in mind as you're glancing through this that it's nothing that you're going to have to memorize right away at this point as you're reading it first thing in your work in this course. Next section is the official coding guidelines for coding and reporting, and this is the basic rule, law, guidelines as to how to code. So each and every one of these things need to be followed, of these guidelines need to be followed as you are coding. Now the order of the guidelines here actually is followed in your handbook as you're learning in the first 7 chapters of the handbook. The order is followed in the handbook, so it's kind of nice that you get to sort of follow along. As you move through the official coding guidelines, once you get through the basic guidelines, then you get to the chapter-specific coding guidelines. And what we mean by that is the infectious disease chapter, or the endocrine chapter, or the mental health chapter, and so on. And finally, after the official coding guidelines, we get to the index of diseases and injuries. And this is going to be a real quick description of how you code as a coder. There's more details to it, but I'll just do it quickly here. So you are reading a medical record, and the medical record is written in words and text. And so you want to code cerebral vascular infarction. And what you do is you look at that diagnosis, cerebral vascular infarction. What is the main term? And a main term is, what is the condition, injury, or disease? Not the description of it, but what is the main condition or disease or injury? And in this case, it's an infarction. So you read that on the medical record, you get the term infarction, and then you come to this alphabetic index and go to the I's for infarction, and you look for cerebral vascular. And I'm just going to sit with infarction. It's on page in the index. Go to cerebral, and then you have a code listed there, I63.9. Then what you do once you have that number is you go back to the color, towards the back of the book, to the color banded pages, which lists the codes and descriptions in alphabetical order. Every diagnosis code starts with a letter, and you can see that with the screen in front of you here that I've captured in this recording. So when you look at that I63, you can know that's an I. It's not a 1, because all diagnosis codes start with a letter. And go to your I63, and then that's in the back tabular portion, color banded, and you can find that code, and then you would add additional characters. So I'm just giving you a real quick description of the first steps in coding, and helping you to familiarize yourself with the textbook. So again, you're taking written word, which of course has alphabetic letters, and then you find that word from the chart in the index, and then you find the code number, and you would go back to the color pages to verify and add on characters, additional codes, and so on. Okay, so in the gray banded area, as you flip through that, it is alphabetical, and once you get to the Z's, you next come across a neoplasm table, and this is for the diagnosis of neoplasms. You don't look neoplasms up in alphabetically in the gray index. You come to this table, and then you would find the body part listed alphabetically in the table where the neoplasm is. So I'm going to say it's alveolar, so I find that alphabetically, A-L-V-E-O-L-A-R, and then go across the table and look up at the headings of the columns and pick, according to my documentation, what type of neoplasm it is. Is it malignant primary, malignant secondary, and so on. So, and we'll obviously get into this a lot more as we when we get to that chapter of coding. But if you flip to the end of the neoplasm table, okay, you then come across a table of drugs and chemicals, and these are drugs and chemicals listed alphabetically, and then you move across the columns just like we did in the neoplasm table as to what happened to the drug and or chemical in the patient. Did they take it intentionally, unintentionally, and so on. These tables you might want to mark and tab You might want to tab the beginning of your alphabetic index as well, so it's easier to find. At the end of the table in drugs and chemicals, we then come to the external cause index, and we'll talk about this a little bit in the first learning plan. But again, this is an alphabetic index as well. And then starts what we call the tabular portion, the colored banded pages. And it starts out with, again, alphabetical, the codes that start with the letter A, B, C, D, all the way to the end to Z. And then at the very end of this code book, you have some appendices. We don't necessarily use these very often. You might find them helpful once in a while. There is steps to correct coding in the back, but you also have that in your handbook. There are, I'm looking for it now, some drugs categorized by what are anticoagulant drugs, seizure drugs, and so on. That's not a complete listing. There are some diagrams back here, and so on. So you can use this how you like. I don't necessarily refer to it in this course. You might use some of it more in your advanced coding courses. I'm going to end this first part recording right now. The second part will be my introduction of your handbook, the other book in this course, and then just a quick summary. End of recording 1.